You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
It's Travis Currah and Sheldon Jones as the CFL has kicked off. Week 1 is in the books, and everything went just as we thought it would.
Nostradamus over here.
Yeah, we know everything. And no, everybody knows nothing. We're all back to square one, and that's why we love the CFL. I'm back from a 10-day vacation. Spent times in the mountains. I've got stories for days, but one of the most exciting moments of the whole, I think, trip was when a grizzly bear actually ran through the campsite. So here's the deal. Did I tell you this? During
No.
Okay, so during this time of year, I don't want to get too nature on the podcast, but grizzly bears are hunting elk calves during this time of year. And well, elk hang out near people in campsites all the time. So the bears go where the food is. And they were coming in the campsite. And I was visiting some friends. And out of nowhere, the park warden goes, "Everybody get in your car. There is a bear in the campsite." And we get in our car, and I'm serious, 15 seconds later, right where we were sitting at the picnic table, the bear comes rumbling through the campsite, and Parks Canada is kind of like hot on his tail, and the bear is like, "I gotta get out of here." And Parks Canada's got paintball guns, and they're like, "Keep moving, bear, keep moving." And he just kept going through the campsite. But man, that was such a cool experience. I love bears. I have since I was a kid. I was happy to be out of his way while he was in search of a springtime meal, though. But hey, I'm happy to be out of the wild as well, even though I do look a little wild and my beard still smells like campfire smoke.
Yeah, you went into the wilderness and I went to a tourist trap, but it was beautiful because I just got back from Niagara myself. It was great.
It's kind of like mini Las Vegas with a big waterfall, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That Clifton Hill is really fun and interesting.
Yeah.
Lots of cool stuff there. Yeah,
Okay.
It was good times, but I'm glad football's back.
We got lots to talk about. We know who's going to be playing the halftime show at the 111th Grey Cup. There will be more ways to watch CFL football in Canada. We'll let you know on those later in the show. I do want to start by talking about these new alternate jerseys that seem to be unveiled from various teams around the league. I'm going to throw up some pictures up on the YouTube broadcast right now. If you do want to check that out, subscribe to Two and Out on YouTube. The Ottawa Red Blacks unveiling these threads. It's kind of a nod to, the past with the Ottawa Roughriders. There's very little red, I will admit. There's a lot of black.
It would look a lot better if they took the stripes and put them on the sides instead of the tops, I think. I think that the shoulder stripes just don't work with these ones. Otherwise, they're cool.
I actually thought they were going to maybe work some plaid in. There's been some rumors of that. I think they had that plaid jersey they only wore once. And the helmet,
that was
I think.
awesome.
Yeah, it was very, very cool. And they also, the Red Blacks are on bye this week, unveiled one of the best bobbleheads I've ever seen. I don't know if I can work the highlight maybe into the YouTube video, but the legendary touchdown celebration from offensive lineman, two-time CFL All-Star John Gott chugs a beer from a fan in the end zone, and they're turning it into a bobblehead. This might be one of the best pieces of sports memorabilia I've ever seen, man.
Yeah, it's amazing. Best bobblehead ever. And judging by that back little cupboard counter there, someone needs to help Travis get one here because he's not in Ottawa. So somebody help out.
We got John Cornish back there, Doug Flutie, Darrell Walker, I should say. I had it mixed up with that receiver video. Daryl Mitchell, Mookie Mitchell, Trevor Harris, Michael Riley. But yeah, John Gott would look great back there as well. Let's go to the Edmonton Elks unveiling these alternate jerseys they did wear in their home opener against the Riders. They're going to be wearing them 2 more times this season. I'm assuming one will be against Calgary in the Labor Day rematch, but I thought those jerseys, I think they look very cool as well. And then once you dig into the details surrounding, the 75th anniversary of the team, I think it makes the jerseys even cooler. I will say, from the stands, when the players were close to you, the numbers looked great. But when they were across the field, it was pretty tough to discern the numbers. I actually talked to a stat spotter at Commonwealth Stadium that did say the numbers were nightmares. So,
yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah.
There's one of those as well. And then the Saskatchewan Roughriders, you see on the broadcast on YouTube, the alternate jerseys, Kean Schaefer Baker showing it off there. There's also a new logo in there. Man, I think those look pretty cool too. I kind of wonder what those numbers are going to look like once they get them on the field. But either way, at first look, those Rough Rider alts are looking pretty cool, Sheldon.
Yeah, I know I'm a homer, but those are honestly, like, since BC's like gunmetal uniforms, which these are obviously pretty similar to, and just in green, but these are the best jerseys since then. Like, honestly, like, I love these. I went to the store, looked at them. I have to wait few paychecks before I could pick one up myself. Because they wouldn't let me use my MVP for it, which doesn't make sense, but whatever. That's another story.
Oh, it's all about the money, baby.
Yeah, but they're the same. Like, they're the same price. If they were a different price than the regular jersey, I would get it. But like,
yeah, I guess if the same price, it's kind of weird. Yeah.
But having said that, the numbers are slightly different. It's not just the outline. So I think these numbers will be a little bit easier for the spotters to see, but they look incredible, and I can't wait to see them on the field.
Now, the CFL kicked off with, we don't really want to call it a Grey Cup rematch. The teams don't really want to call it that either. But the Montreal Alouettes beating the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 27-12. So, Sheldon, I just got to take a moment and give a message to our Montreal Alouette viewers and listeners, because I heard from them when I guess we both predicted that they would lose. So I do want to quote Happy Gilmore here for the Montreal Alouette fans. I'm stupid. You're smart. I was wrong. You were right. You're the best. I'm the worst. You're very good looking. I'm not very attractive. Those Montreal Alouettes look like champs, Sheldon.
F us, just watch. Yeah, they looked good. Winnipeg did not. That's not a good combination when you are having a game against Winnipeg. So, full marks to Montreal. There's a lot of people. I think on the pick'em on TSN, I think it was like 75% picking Winnipeg. So again, just like last year, they were picked to be last in the power rankings. Maybe that was some motivation for them, and they obviously used it because Cody looked great. The defense looked great. They looked like defending Grey Cup champs.
Yeah, they look like they're ready for another great season. Well, right from the start. I mean, last year they ended up starting off kind of uneven, and then that winning streak to end the year, win the Grey Cup. I love the line from Rod Smith, because it's true. The last touchdown of last season scored by Tyson Philpott. The first touchdown of this season scored by Tyson Philpott. Now, I do want to talk about the Bombers, the number one ranked player on TSN's top 50, Zach Collaros. I didn't think he looked too bad. I did think a lot of the mistakes were on his receivers. Collaros goes 20 of 33, 209 yards and an interception. But a lot of those guys, Zach got time in training camp, but a lot of the vets didn't. Is that contributing to kind of the performance that the Bombers had in Game 1 at Princess Auto Stadium?
Judging by the online reaction from their fans, yes. It looks like there's a lot of fans who are pretty outraged that they didn't spend some more time in the preseason with their starters. So, Coach O'Shea is definitely one of the best coaches in the league. So it's hard for me to question a decision that he makes. But yeah, they looked rusty. They looked slow and rusty. So that's the stuff that you hope to get out of your system in the preseason and training camp. So hopefully next week for Bomber fans, they come out with a little bit more fire. But uh, it just wasn't a great start for them.
Well, it's not Bomber football to lose the turnover battle and to lose the penalty battle, and that's what happened here, and that's what happened right off the bat. The new returner, Myron Mitchell, fumbles a punt, and then the Alouettes take over. Great field position, and then it was a one play for Tyson Philpott, and the Alouettes took the lead 7-3 at that point in the first quarter. And, well, they never gave it up. And they looked great on defense. I thought Fajardo looked pretty dialed in. And there were a couple plays, a couple tough throws he made, especially to, it was Tyler Sneed. He made a beautiful 47-yard catch. The Keon Julian Grant touchdown that should have been kind of off his hands. Like, Fajardo, he looked pretty darn good. He did have the one interception, but 20 of 28, 254 yards, 2 touchdown passes, and he looks like he's still coming in with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. I think these athletes kind of find reasons that they think that others are writing them off. And Cody wants to prove that last year it wasn't just Cinderella finding the perfect glass slippers, that they belong in the conversation for tops in the CFL.
Yeah, and you see Jason Moss not afraid to call some trick plays again, too. They didn't do the fake punt or whatever here, but that flea flicker was amazing.
That was a dagger. Like, that was actually a pretty a point in the game where maybe the Bombers could find a way to fight back.
Yeah.
And that flea flicker fooled them hard.
Yeah, and that's the worst thing to happen to at home, to have an away team do something like that, just to completely take the crowd out of it. And like you said, they were just starting to get that crowd back, because the crowd they weren't very happy, like, even in the first quarter. So but that just took all of the air out of the stadium, and Montreal just didn't look back after that.
Yeah, it was a 2-score game at that point. 21-6 Montreal. I think it was very early in the fourth quarter. And then, Fajardo hit Tyson Philpott 76 yards for that flea flicker, just absolutely wide open. In the second half, it felt like maybe the Bomber offense was starting to get a little bit of rhythm, but obviously they were hurt with Kenny the King Lawler not playing in the second half. He had, and there was kind of some analysis at halftime on the play as well. If he would have just kept running a few more steps, he probably does have a touchdown. But as it was, he almost did make the circus catch in Kenny the King Lawler style, and only that he does. It looks like a hand injury, so hopefully that's not too serious for him. But Nick Dembski had a lost fumble there as well. There's a couple turnovers that this team, we're not used to seeing them make. So maybe it is going to be a slow start to the season for the Bombers. But I really thought that this was the offense to watch. This was the offense to fear. But maybe it's the Alouettes defense that we need to fear, man.
Yeah, and there's a player playing who probably shouldn't be right now, and he gets a big sack right in the beginning of the game there, right?
Yes.
So, we're gonna see how long it takes for this arbitration to happen, or appeal or whatever. But
O'Shea was quoted in the offseason saying that the game has no room for these guys. The commissioner basically said it's his job to protect the integrity of the league, and Sean Lemon's out there. Yeah. There's some pretty strong words being used, and Lemon's on the field right now.
Only in the CFL.
Only in the CFL, man. I don't want to relate this to Sergio Castillo, but he goes 1 of 3 on field goals, and stuff that he usually makes. He had a team record in field goal percentage last year for the Bombers, and then directly after the game, calling out the microchipped balls. And I had a conversation with a few fans on this at the game in Edmonton. And look, I know that quarterbacks, they like the balls inflated a certain way. So, but it's really hard as a fan to think that a little chip could throw it off that much. But hey, these guys are dialed in, and they'll know the way a kick goes more than I ever will. But there are other guys like Sean White, Brett Lothar came to basically his defense, saying that these are crazy. So now these microchip balls are going to be optional on special teams, and they're going to revisit the situation next year. That's an interesting wrinkle, but I think good for the CFL for kind of changing that so quickly instead of waiting a few weeks.
Was it too quick though? Because, if you have one team play one game,
I get that,
and then I think you probably should make that change the week after so that all the games in that week have the same playing field. But I agree. Kudos for them stepping in so quickly and not waiting like 8 weeks and 3 field goal kickers getting cut because they are sub 500 on field goals. But if it really does make that much of a difference, Again, just like you, I'm not going to call anyone a liar here, and we don't know what we're talking about, but it doesn't seem that, half an ounce is going to make that much of a difference to us, but maybe it does.
Maybe it does. Now, I think both of these teams, well, we'll see what I don't think we have anything to worry about with Brady Oliveira, but 11 carries for 38 yards. I mean, that's a tip of the cap to the Alouettes defense for limiting him that much. But I don't know how much, how long the leash is for Alouettes starting running back Walter Fletcher, who had 12 carries and 36 yards. So 3 yards a carry. I know you're against a Winnipeg team that's historically been very good against the run, but the Alouettes didn't have much of a consistent running game last year, and I guess I just get the sense that maybe they're going to want to establish that as best as they can. But now with Jason Moss in Saskatchewan, they tried those bubble screens a lot to the receivers, but I felt that the receivers in Sask didn't have the physical abilities or will to get those blocks, and I think Moss almost wants that to be his running game a little bit. They were doing it in this game, and those receivers in Montreal are ready, willing, and able to block and make those little screens a success, man.
Yeah, why change it if it's not broken? Why fix it if it's not broken? Because, as you said, Jason Moss hasn't really featured running that much in a long time. Yeah. Sometimes it seems like he's going to try, but then, when you have players like William Stanback, William Powell, big, all-star type running backs, and you don't really use them to their potential, and you're still winning. He won the Grey Cup last year, so far be it for us to say he's not doing the right thing. But in the CFL, you do like to have a balanced running game so that you can set up the pass. So we'll see if he keeps going the same way.
Now, the Bombers spread the ball around, a lot of receivers making catches. I think they're going to be fine. But look, we'll get to the last game of the season. If you would have told me that BC and Winnipeg, I think, in my opinion, two of the powerhouses in the CFL would both be 0-1, I would have thought you were crazy, but here we are. Maybe I am crazy, but the Alouettes spread the ball around as well. But Tyson Philpott, 11 targets, 141 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then the closest receiver was Tyler Snead. He had 62 yards on 2 catches, but Walter Fletcher, Cole Speaker got a target, Charleston Rambo, Keon Julian Grant, and David Dallaire all getting looks in the passing game. But there was a moment in this game, man, where Chris Streveler comes in. He gets tackled by linebacker Reggie Stubblefield, who had a great season in 2023. The replay shows that maybe he twisted his leg a little bit and at the end of the play and hurt his knee or his ankle, something like that. Streveler was angry. They showed him on the bench.
Least.
Yeah, to say the very least. And then the very next play, Stubblefield tore his ACL. Man, what a tough. I mean, I don't want to see him miss the rest of the season, but if it's a torn ACL, he probably will. But in a sequence like that was definitely weird to see, man.
Yeah, I don't want to see anybody get injured, but it almost looked like a little bit of karma. I hate to say that, but, it definitely looked like he did take a little bit liberties when he tackled Streveler there and did give that twist. And, I don't know if you believe in football gods. I know Darian Durant sure did back in the day. But yeah, that was some pretty quick action if those football gods are up there.
Winnipeg is going to be back playing on Thursday against Ottawa on the road. The Bombers will be for Ottawa's first game against Drew Brown, it looks like. And then the Alouettes are going to be in Edmonton for Friday night football. This past Friday had Jake Maier and the Calgary Stampeders beating the Hamilton Tiger Cats 32-24 with Bo Levi Mitchell's return to Calgary for the first time since leaving Calgary to go to the Calgary or to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. It ended up being Calgary's 700th win in franchise history. And you know what? Through the first 2-3 games of the season, I thought all the starting quarterbacks looked pretty darn good, including in this game. I think both quarterbacks, you could see at least putting into action what they were working on in the offseason. Jake Maier comes in. It's a contract year. He's the only quarterback to play all 18 in 2023, but he comes in. He's looking a little bit leaner, a little bit meaner, a little bit more dialed in. I thought he looked good. And Bo has been working on his footwork as well, and he was showing it off. I think he was moving around in the pocket better than he ever has been. Still a little bit inconsistent there. Again, could have used help from receivers on a few of those plays. And it does seem like, I don't know if it was miscommunication, expecting the receiver to be in a different place, but those intermediate routes seems to be, that's kind of where Bo is struggling right now, Sheldon.
Yeah, he looks like he's hitting his targets downfield, but he has had a couple drops that, if Tim White keeps a hold of both of those, that could be a quite the different game. But
different for my fantasy roster as well, so thanks.
Yeah. But honestly, it's good to see Bo back to somewhat form. I know it's only one game. Let's see if he can continue that, but it's good for the league to have all the quarterbacks playing well. Like that's what we want as fans for entertainment, right? So and like you said, Jake Maier, he looks like he's focused, and he did have the help of his receivers because they made a couple tough catches too, and that's what he seemed to be lacking last year a lot, was help from the receivers. So if they can keep that together, then maybe Calgary isn't as bad as we all thought they were.
Hey, do you want to give a little bit of a Happy Gilmore quote to the Stampeder fans that are always on you, or not quite?
No, because if they very well could have lost this game with a couple plays going the other way.
That's true.
I'm not quite ready yet, but you know what? Jake, you impressed me. Keep it up.
21 of 26, 252 yards and 2 touchdowns for the mayor of McMahon. Bo Levi, on the other hand, he did have a 300-yard passing game, 27 of 38, a touchdown and a pick to Demario Houston, by the way. Demario Houston, the newcomer in Calgary, picking right up where he left off last year. Now, James Butler, and I thought, man, if the Ticats would have just done this all game long, he had 9.2 yards a carry. 13 carries for 119 yards for the Ticats. I guess he was a game time decision, but I guess they made the right decision by playing him. But man, 6 rushes of 10 yards or more? I don't know if this is a trend that we have to watch for the Stampeders defense going forward. And I know it was a losing effort, but the Ticats were able to run the ball effectively. And what's with Bo Levi Mitchell? 3 carries for 36 yards. I feel like he's had seasons with less rushing yards than that, Sheldon.
Yeah, he must have been feeling it being back in the old digs. You know what? I think he knows this is his last shot. He's not quite ready to be sitting on the panel, which is what's next. So I think he's going to go out there and try his best to just will this team to wins. And like I said before, Tim White dropped a sure touchdown, and that they had a little bit of momentum at that time, and it was just extinguished there. So good on him. And honestly, Calgary was running on Hamilton too. It was very interesting that some of these games had the premier top backs in the league, getting less than 50, 40, 30 yards, and then the couple other games where the running backs just went off. So very interesting. Some of these teams seem a little bit dialed in their D-line and linebackers.
Yeah, Dedrick Mills, he was running physically, although they kind of spelled him off a little bit. Dedrick had 13 carries for 87 yards. So, I mean, when you're getting over 6 yards a carry, you're laughing. BJ Emmons had 5 carries for 23 yards. Dedrick also had 2 catches for 19 yards. So they definitely want to feature him, but double-digit carries, like if I'm building a fantasy roster, I like the future going forward for Dedrick Mills there. And if we look at the Ticat receivers, they were spreading the ball around, but it felt like they wanted to get Shamar Bridges the ball more. Kind of an uneven performance there. 7 catches for 85 yards. There was 11 targets there. Some of it went kind of awry. Tim White had 6 catches, 55 yards on 11 targets. So if that tells us anything going forward, double-digit targets for both guys. The Ticats are comfortable with getting them involved. Brendan O'Leary-Orange, 4 catches. Stephen Dunbar, 5 catches for the Ticats. But the touchdown did go to Keandre Smith, 3 catches, 37 yards. But we got to talk about a newcomer to the Stampeders lineup, and that is Cam Eccles. You talked about not much help from Stampeder receivers last year. Well, Cam Eccles makes a great one-handed catch in the end zone for the first touchdown of the year for Jake Mayer and the first touchdown in his CFL career. He has 3 catches for 40 yards. He looked pretty good, but the leading receiver for the Stampeders was the Canadian Clark Barnes. 6 catches, 8 targets, 61 yards, and a touchdown. He looked great. I thought Jake looked pretty darn good right from the beginning in this game, and that's really what happened here. There are a few more moments from this game that I do want to highlight. Sometimes in a football game, it's just the way that you respond, right? And the Ticats get that touchdown early in the fourth quarter. So at that point, they're within 8 points. Well, the very next drive, the Calgary Stampeders drive all the way down the field. That's when Clark Barnes gets the touchdown. And then there are a few, I guess you would call, controversial moments. There was the, completion that Bo had with Shamar Bridges. And as he comes down, I don't think it was really much of a controversy, but the elbow hits the turf, the ball comes out, the Stamps thought they should have had the ball, and I think that Dickinson wanted to challenge that after the review.
He was getting rattled.
He was rattled about that one. And, I don't know if you noticed the moment when Stavros Katsantonis ends up hitting Mark and Michelle. Now, I think the injury happened when his head hit the turf. He probably didn't need to deliver the hit at all. He does get wobbly. He does look like the Calgary receiver did get knocked out there. And Nick Lewis is fired up on the Calgary sideline. And Dave Dickinson grabs him and throws him back. Like, you've never seen the quarterback throw a receiver like Dave Dickinson threw the great Nick Lewis. But hey, when you're both Hall of Famers, I guess both things get heated on the sideline. But Sheldon, don't tell these guys it's only week one.
Yeah, no, they're fired up, and I love to see it. It's funny seeing Dave Dickinson as the calming factor and trying to settle down Thick Nick because Dave, he's got a little bit of a short temper. So, calls could go either way, and then injuries happen, and it's just crazy how momentum can swing like that, and a call can just change the game.
27 total points in the fourth quarter. The Ticats did outscore the Stamps there, but ended up losing 32-24. I think a pretty overall entertaining affair there, just like the Saturday game was, as the Saskatchewan Roughriders visited the Edmonton Elks. A 29-21 victory for the Roughriders, but you want to talk about mistake-laden football. I think it was the team who made the least mistakes in the end was the team that won. It was the first start for Trevor Harris since, I guess, breaking his leg last summer for the Riders, and then the first head coaching victory for Corey Mace in his first regular season game as a head coach for the Green and White. But it was a pretty rough start for the Riders. The Elks did go into the halftime with an 11-7 win here. It was raining. They were celebrating Dwayne Mandrusiak getting on the Builders wall. Michael Riley, Warren Moon, Damon Allen were all in attendance in Edmonton. And hey, the rain even knocked the replay screen in stadium out of commission for about a quarter and a half there. I did talk to some people behind the scenes that work at the stadium and said internally, they were soiling themselves. But, it was pretty... Look, football, you're in the business of winning games. And I would say that the Elks probably needed this win more than the Riders. But the Riders can't just go in and say, hey, we think you guys need a win for your franchise. We're going to hand you the victory. But at times, Sheldon, it almost seemed like that was going to happen in this one.
Yeah. That was the most exciting, sloppiest game I think I've seen in a long time.
Well, it was like the preseason game, really.
It was. And honestly, the games between the Riders and the Elks in Edmonton have been like this for a few years now. 10 years ago, it seemed like the Riders were always getting killed in Commonwealth. And then the past, few years, ever since COVID or right before, it just seems like they're, games that are rainy or it comes down to a team making a mistake. Last year, it was the Elk returner, giving up a single point, giving the Riders the lead.
Stuffed on the goal line 3 times.
Yeah. And then this game, it seemed like, each team was deciding, they just didn't want to win. But, the fourth quarter was crazy, just like most of the other games this week. But, Trevor Harris looked actually pretty good. He had a few overthrows, a few underthrows a couple times. His receiver might have slipped, and that definitely led to the one pick right at the end of the first half there. I don't think I've seen Chris Jones that happy since he won the Grey Cup. He was jumping up and down. very out of character for Chris Jones.
Well, these games became crazy because of the Chris Jones factor. Going from Edmonton to Saskatchewan to the NFL, back to the CFL with Edmonton. So that adds a lot to these games. But man, you talk about mistakes, and we thought that, and in the past, I would say, okay, go back to when Gizmo retired. Return touchdowns have been hard to come by for the Elks. And they had one last year, late in the year, and they get one here with Javon Leake. He returns at 75 yards to the house, but an illegal block brings that one back. And then the Elks, they end up having an interception. It was Niles Morgan on Trevor Harris, but pass interference. It's Saskatchewan ball. And then not long after that, Jake Julian punts it to Super Mario Alford, who returns it 91 yards to the house, only to have an illegal block called, bringing that back. So there were big plays taken off the board in this game.
Yeah, and it was very symmetrical because, each team had a touchdown. Each team had a touchdown, taken off the board. And then, Sean Bain got 2 touchdowns early. Or not so early, but Sean Bain got 2 touchdowns. Hergy Mayala got 2 touchdowns. Yeah. It just seemed like it was like, the teams were copying each other. And then, it just seemed like the team that made the most mistakes, and that was the Elks. They just gave up the ball too many times, and their run defense did an awesome job. The Riders' pass protection did an awesome job actually too. It was a tale of 2 offensive lines there because they couldn't make any holes for AJ Ouellette. He had 35 yards or something on 11 carries, so not a good night for him. But then, Brown didn't get many yards either, so there wasn't, the trenches weren't, giving up a bunch of holes, or they weren't able to make holes in the trenches. But I think McLeod looked good at times. He didn't look good at other times. Trevor was definitely the better quarterback on the day, even though he did throw 2 interceptions. But, one of them, Ken Schaefer-Baker, if he doesn't slip there, I think he probably gets the ball. They were kind of rolling there. Honestly, when you're the Riders and you're playing a game in Commonwealth, if you can get a 1-point win, that's all you need. And they got a little bit more than 1 point this game. So, we're not gonna be happy. We're not gonna be unhappy.
Brett had 7 rushes for 23 yards. AJ Ouellette, 18 carries for 40 yards.
Oh, okay, that's awful.
Man, I'm willing to bet that if he's going to get 18 carries almost every game, the guy should probably be getting near 100. Under a 2-yard average. That's a tough day at the office. And he actually had a lost fumble late in the game that gave the Elks an opportunity at getting within a 2-point conversion of tying the game in the dying moments here. You talk about mistakes, though, man. You're right. The Elks had 11 penalties for 101 yards, and the Riders, they weren't angels themselves. 6 penalties, 84 yards. 25 of those were for Logan Furland, who ended up getting disqualified from the game. He did throw a punch in this one, and man, that early in the season, it just seems like discipline has been an issue for the Riders over the past few years. Now we will see how a new guy at the helm in Corey Mace is going to handle those issues, Sheldon.
Yeah, I will say one thing that was positive is, that you said there were 6 penalties. 5 of those were in the first half, and only 1 was in the second half. It was still a stupid penalty with Jaden Dalkey, taunting. We couldn't see on the broadcast what he actually did, but whatever he did was close enough to an official that deemed it unnecessary. So, but other than that, they cleaned up the penalties. So obviously, Coach Mace has that presence early to talk to the team at halftime, get them settled, maybe, rein them in a little bit. But honestly, the Riders did rebound in the second half, more into the fourth quarter, when they capitalized on some mistakes that the Elks made. But I really liked Mark Mueller's play calling, and I really liked some of his offensive plays that he had. There was just different layers that I noticed on the broadcast where there was different options. Like if Ouellette went out and if the DB or the linebacker crashed on him, they could go over top. But the same thing if the DB followed the receiver going on a straight route, then Ouellette was there. So I'm very impressed with Mark Mueller's offense early on.
A lot of the silly penalties did go the Riders' way. Throwing the punch, the objectionable conduct or taunting or whatever after the big Roland Milligan hit. So some silly stuff there. And hey, these two teams don't like each other. They were talking after the play. They were pushing and shoving after almost every play. So yeah, it did come down to a punch thrown, which, I mean, if you're punching at a guy that has a concrete cinder block on his head, that does seem kind of silly to me. But
well, if you take a good shot, like Ferland didn't hit him very hard, but if you're not paying attention and you take a good shot, you could injure your neck there. It's all for player safety, but like Milt Stiegel said on the broadcast,
I just think punching a guy with a helmet on is stupid. But
yeah, okay, sorry, yeah, okay,
that's what I mean.
Fair enough. Yeah.
The guy could get hurt receiving the punch, but if you're gonna punch a guy with a football helmet on, I don't know.
Gotcha.
Rein it in a little bit, but
gotcha.
Javon Leak, I think there was the lost fumble that he had, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm looking at the stat sheet right now. There's a lot of craziness on this one. Darius Bratton for the Elks, he actually had a interception and a fumble recovery, so he was kind of all over the place for the Elks secondary there. But I thought both quarterbacks in this one, they had some tough moments. I mean, it's game one, but man, they were both pretty dialed in, and I think they're both kind of similar guys in many respects there. And there was a time in the game where McLeod Bethel Thompson got pretty dialed in and found some soft spots in the middle of the Rider defense. And he threw for 336 yards, 32 of 42, 2 touchdowns and an interception. So he had better completion percentage, more yards than Trevor Harris. And hey, Dylan Mitchell had a nice game. 7 catches, 93 yards. He had a tough catch in there as well. Highlight reel style. Last year, a bit of a down year, I think, coming off the expectations from 2022, but a nice start to him. Curly Gittens Jr., 9 catches on 12 targets. Clearly, McLeod Bethel Thompson wanted to look his way going back to their Toronto days. And Geno Lewis, you can always rely on him. 4 catches, 85 yards, including a 52-yard completion. And leaving Geno wide open, I don't know about that strategy. I don't, like 87, maybe the Riders were having trouble reading those numbers as well, because somebody's always got to be on 87. But you mentioned his name, Hergy Mayala, who I liked his career in Calgary, and then he went to Montreal, and not a lot happened in Montreal. But his first game of the year for Edmonton is 5 catches, 40 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I feel really good for the Canadian for having that performance for the Elks. But then just looking over to the Rider side, where, man, things sure changed, because at the beginning of the fourth quarter, it's 21-8 Edmonton. And then Trevor Harris has that drive. There was 3 plays. He completes one to Sean Bain for 17 yards. Then he hits Kean Schaefer-Baker for 13 yards. And then it's a 40-yard touchdown to Sean Bain Jr. Then Kevin Brown on the very next drive fumbles the ball. Jameer Thurman recovers it. And then a few plays after that, it's A.J. Ouellette with the 1-yard touchdown. All of a sudden, the Riders have a 22-21 lead. And that is with not much input from the Edmonton offense. Things changed in a snap of a finger, and that is That's been par for the course for the Elks over the last little while. And I got the feeling from the fans in the stands at Commonwealth Stadium, a little bit shell-shocked, a little bit not again kind of thing. But Cian Schaefer-Baker was amping up Rider Nation in attendance. And I don't know if you could hear the Let's Go Riders chants.
Yeah.
Some Let's Go Oilers trying to drown them out, but Rider Nation came in. There's actually a big crossover between Oiler fans and Rider fans, so I think maybe they were washing each other out a little bit. Oilers losing game 1, by the way. But those Riders fans, I don't know if it came through on TV, but they were doing pretty well in the stands at Commonwealth, man.
Oh yeah, you could hear it. Like, look at Jaden Dalkey had 110, of his own family and friends in Section Y.
110?
Yeah, he had an interview with Justin Dunk on the pregame show there, and yeah, his mom took care of finding, seats for 110 friends and family. So, because he's from Leduc, so right there, right, and. You're always going to get a good rider crowd in Edmonton and Calgary. It just happens from all the transplants. You go from Saskatchewan to Alberta, right? So that's always good to see. But yeah, no, it was definitely audible on TSN. You could certainly hear the Let's Go Riders chants, which is always, fun to hear when they're not playing in their own barn.
I thought it was a pretty good turnout as far as fans go in Edmonton. There were over 20,000 people there. The weather sucked. The Oilers were playing in the Stanley Cup. I know they moved kickoff a few hours early. If it did overlap with the game, probably less people would have shown up.
Yeah.
But the Elks didn't get the win. The Riders did by scoring 21 points in the fourth quarter. And hey, the fourth quarter in the CFL is when games are won, and the Elks back to the drawing board a little bit. McLeod Bethel Thompson putting that loss, on his shoulders in many respects. And I did hear some chants in the crowd, Sheldon, we want Trey, we want Trey. And I was kind of joking about it as well. But I think McLeod's got a pretty good leash here. He did make some great passes in this one in his return to the CFL. But things only get tougher from the Edmonton Elks as the reigning Grey Cup champs, who just went into Winnipeg and got a pretty decisive win, are going to be visiting Commonwealth Stadium this week as the Saskatchewan Roughriders. What's next on their schedule, Sheldon?
Yeah, so Saskatchewan goes to Hamilton this week, and then it's a home and next week. Hamilton comes to Saskatchewan.
Back-to-back Sunday nighters for the two teams. I think Bow versus Saskatchewan is always a great matchup. I know that Bow has real estate in Regina, so...
Yep. I'm sure it's an Airbnb, and it's making lots of money for him, I'm sure.
And we'll see. Hey, maybe the newcomer to Saskatchewan's secondary, Marcus Sayles. That'll be interesting to see if he does get into the lineup for the green and white soon. Just looking at the rest of the stats. Yeah, the leading receiver, Sean Bain Jr., 5 catches, 125 yards, and 3 touchdowns. An absolute monster game for him. One thing for the Riders is that until, almost the last drive of the game, the Rider D-line was not getting any pressure in the passing game at all. They were doing good, stopping the run, but not much pressure on McLeod Bethel Thompson. They're going to want to fix that as the season goes on. But Brian Cox Jr. did get that big forced fumble and sack late in the game, and DeMarcus Fields got the other sack. As far as the D-line for the Elks, it was Michael Broderick with a sack and Robert Nendamish with the sack. I have no idea why I attempted that live. I will try to have that pronunciation ready for the next show. So, Sheldon, the Riders won, so that brought me to 1-2 in my pick'em.
Same.
And I was thinking the Lions would be able to bring me to 2-2 and somewhat salvage the week. But Cameron Dukes and the Toronto Argonauts get a 35-27 win over those BC Lions. I think the hyped BC Lions for this year. Now, we'll talk about some off-the-field stuff with the Lions right now. 50 Cent is going to be playing a pregame concert there. They're expecting a sellout at BC Place. Already over 50,000 tickets sold for the Lions home opener. And they've already announced, Sheldon, the Grey Cup halftime show, the 111th Grey Cup, happening in Vancouver this November. It's the Jonas Brothers. I'm a sucker for you, Sheldon Jones. I'm in for this.
Yeah, I know it's not the Jonas Brothers, but let's get some cake by the ocean, by the Pacific Ocean.
Wait.
That's one of them. That's the different band.
Oh, okay. You're going deep. Jonas. You're going deep on the Jonas Brothers.
That's right, because I'm that big of a fan. No, just kidding. But seriously, this is a great get for the league because, I'm not sure that they're our cup of tea. They're not bad, but that's not what the league is looking for. They don't want, to book the bands that the, late 30s males are looking for. We're trying to get a TV audience here, and with some other news about, where the game's going to be broadcast, having a band like the Jonas Brothers is huge for the league.
Actually, yeah, you brought up a great point. Well, I'll get to that right away here, but I think that's massive news that cannot be understated for the Canadian Football League. But hey, I know there's always the crying of we need Canadian bands playing the halftime show, but I'll tell you this. Alessia Cara played the halftime show at the 2018 Grey Cup. She had to shut down her social media for a little bit because of the amount of bullying she got. And Justin Bieber played the 100th Grey Cup and got booed at halftime. So don't tell me that you want Canadian talent. You want what you like. You don't care what country they're from. So I don't care. These guys got some catchy tunes, and I think it's going to be a great show, and that's what it is all about. We talk about the great show, and hey, the CFL is going to be on CTV this fall. They're going to have fall Saturday games, the Eastern playoff games, the East Semi, the East Final, and the Grey Cup, all playing on CTV, which any household that has a TV can basically access this stuff. There have been people calling for this for a long time. Every single fan state of the league I've gone to at the Grey Cup, the commissioner has asked about this. And this year, there is going to be CFL football on CTV. I think this is big, and I'm really interested to see what those ratings are going to be post Grey Cup. But this is nothing but good news for the league, man.
Yeah, it's huge. I only really know of one person who thinks it's not that huge, and we'll see at the end if he's right or if the rest of the fans who've been clamoring for this for a long time are right. It's huge because the NFL is on CTV, and it does get good numbers, and you would think that a Canadian team or a Canadian league would try to pull in those same numbers, and getting that same advertising is great for the league. So there's not a bad thing about this, and it's just going to put more eyes. The only interesting thing is that will be very interesting with the ratings is those Saturday games are exclusive to CTV. They're not on TSN. So we'll see what that does translate to only the CTV market as opposed to adding the two together.
Yeah, that's another interesting point here, but I think more games in more places is so good for the growth of this league, and this fall we'll see how that is going to look. Back to those BC Lions, all of their games are going to be broadcast this season in Punjabi, which is also another great move, but the first broadcast was a loss for those BC Lions. And you know what? I think a lot of us had the Argos written off here. But maybe this system, with this offensive line, with this receiving core, And that strong running game that they still have with Kadeem Carey means that there is such a strong supporting cast around their quarterback that it almost doesn't matter who's behind center for this team. And I don't want to take away from Cameron Dukes at all, but man, those Argos, and especially that defense, I knew they were going to be good, but the D-line really bullied the BC O-line, and that was also another big difference in this game.
Yeah, Vernon Adams was running for his life most of the game. And that's the way you throw Vernon Adams off. And I wouldn't say he was that off, actually. He still had a pretty good game. But yeah, like, this is the exact same thing as the Montreal Alouettes. You know, we collectively rode off the Argos, and you know what? Maybe if Cam Dukes can play another 8 games like this tonight, then that's putting a really big decision in the hands of the Argos general manager and coach. Because if you have a player like Cameron Dukes who's winning games for you, you don't need that distraction of that other person coming back who hasn't been there for 9 games. So very interesting times. I know there's a lot of Argo fans who'd be very happy if that happened. I had him in fantasy this week. I took that gamble, and it definitely paid off for me. So I'm pretty happy about that.
21
I
of
still
27,
think I lost.
254 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had a rushing touchdown, 37 yards on 5 carries. Who did you lose against?
I think I'm against Coop, but I think it's because he had Philpott, and I think he went off for some other players.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not certain, but I think I lost.
Man, I guess you should have made Dukes your captain to double up those points, but he had a great performance, man. And why? Did the rest of your team suck?
Not suck, but I had Ouellette as my captain, so he had decent numbers once the captaincy added the double there.
Wow, and if he didn't get that 1-yard touchdown, your week would have been.
Yeah, I ended up with 100 and some points, so not terrible.
As for the BC Lions, Justin McInnes, who I thought would be getting a bigger role this year, he had 7 catches, 103 yards, and a touchdown. Alexander Hollins. Keon Hatcher, by the way, did not play in this game, and he could be considered the leader of that receiving corps in many respects. Hollins had 8 catches, 90 yards. The newcomer, Travis Fulgham, had 2 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown, a 54-yard touchdown, which I don't know if I've seen many plays where it actually looked like all 3 receivers could have had the touchdown. There was one defender for 3 receivers. They all could have made the play. Like, yeah, the Lions really fooled the Argos on that play, but it's the same tale as last year. They get William Stanback back there. Still can't really get the run going. 11 carries, 35 yards. It was a long of 10, so I like to do this. 9 carries for 25 yards. Without that 10-yard rush, that's not going to get it done. And look, running against the Argos is not going to be easy. The depth that they displayed last year on that D-line, those linebackers, you take a few of them away, well, next man up, right? That Jared Brinkman, that is a name that we're going to know, I think, a lot this year. He got into a few games last year. He was a beast. In this one, Jared Brinkman had 2 sacks. He had a forced fumble. He's rubbing his belly. That D lineman is hungry, and I don't want to be an offensive lineman in his way, man, at all. And then the addition of Jake Seresna. They've still got Flo Orimolade. That defensive line had 6 sacks. Whew. Yeah, they're going to be cooking, and they already were against the Lions.
Yeah, and we all thought that defense was pillaged, right? And they found pieces to plug right back in there. And Brinkman, maybe call him Brinks, because he's going to be taking a lot of. He's a taking a lot of trucks to that Sacks. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's a monster, and hey, the Argos proved that they're the real deal, man. Like they were 16-2 last year for a reason. They mentioned it on the broadcast. They change up their special teams by losing their kicker to Edmonton. Well, Liram Hajrullahu comes in, and he did go 3 for 3. Hey, we want to talk kickers. I didn't even mention Rene Paredes of the Stamps, who kicked 6 field goals for them, which is crazy.
Just another day at the office for him.
Yeah, which, I mean, there are some great kickers right now. So, again, like, I'm a guy that I can't kick a ball without a microchip in it. So,
and Brett Lowther didn't even need to attempt a field goal this week. So that was kind of interesting for the Riders there.
Yeah, very interesting for those for the kickers of the CFL. But then Janarian Grant too, he comes in, and if you're getting a 14-yard average on those punt returns, and that's an average, I think you're doing okay. So he was doing pretty good returning kicks, and for the Argos, as they lose Javon Leake to Edmonton. They made some great moves in the offseason, and it does look like they're going to be just fine. Kadeem Carey, he had 16 carries for 65 yards. Daniel Adeboboye, he had 19 yards on the ground, and the leading receiver for the Argos was actually Dejon Brissett, who had 3 catches for 52 yards and a touchdown. But Carey had a touchdown receiving, and Rasheed Bailey looks like a guy, after spending 4 seasons in Winnipeg, that they really want to get involved in the offense in Toronto. 5 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. Bailey with a good debut for the double blue Sheldon Jones.
Yeah, he's looking to replace Curly Gittens Jr. there as their number one, Canadian receiver. So I think, great debut. I've always thought he's been really good. I was kind of hoping the Riders are going to go after him last season. But the Argos, they shocked us all. I think full marks to them, and then we'll see what happens as they keep going here. But there's going to be a big fight for that number 1 spot in the East. It's definitely not, as we thought a week ago, where Montreal was going to, run away with it. But even Montreal is better than we thought too, right? So, this East division has gotten pretty tight.
Yeah, I love to see it. I mean, Montreal and Toronto are each 1-0, while BC and Winnipeg are each 0-1, which I really didn't think we would see. We talk kickers. Sean White, he's aces today's assignment as well, including a 51-yarder. So he goes 2 for 2 there. And the leading receiver for the Lions, we already mentioned him, Justin McInnes. Aiden Eberhardt gets a catch, a nice one for 27 yards. And Javon Cotoy, 2 catches for 39 yards. So Vernon Adams Jr., 25 of 33, 363 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. So it does look like that offense is going to go as he goes, for sure. The Lions did take a lead late in the fourth quarter. There was a couple moments there where I thought Vernon Adams Jr. was going to have some magic. They did actually convert about a second and 24, something like that. And then they actually went for it on 3rd and a mile late in the game. And they were so close.
From the 1 yard line.
Oh, yeah, from the 1 yard line. But the difference was, as the game went on, the Argos D-line beat up the Lions O-line. What are the adjustments that BC is going to make to get the running game going and keep Vernon Adams healthy? He is already favoring that hand a little bit. It doesn't look like... hopefully it's not that serious. I guess he got stepped on kind of thing. They were trying to figure out what happened to the hand there. But if that Argo defense is going to be playing like that and pressuring quarterbacks like that, the Argos are going to be just fine. And they are on bye this upcoming week. Well, the BC Lions are going to be home to the Calgary Stampeders for that big home opener with 50 Cent playing the pre-game concert. Now, my fantasy week was not good, Sheldon Jones. Less than 70 points on the week. Even though the Lions got a defensive touchdown, the fumble return, they still got me a big goose egg. 0. So 67.5 points was my week. So I really hope that's my worst week of the season, but I do somehow doubt that. What was your total here?
Yeah, I ended up with 113.9, so not bad. I got 8 points from the Riders D. Cameron Dukes got me 31.7. Double Oulette was 24. My only real... Brady Oliveira didn't get me much, only 8.5, and then Kenny Lawler, he got injured kind of early on there, so he only got me 5.6. So if I would have had, a little bit more, if I would have put a Kadeem Carey in there and a Tyson Fulpott in there, we would have been laughing. But I'll take 114 points. That's good for a first week.
Yeah, you beat me by 47? So... Yeah, look at you being all humble as the week 1 of the CFL season is in the books. It's kicked off. We're right back into the thick of things. Week 2 will start on Thursday. You can join 2 and Out for fantasy and pick'em. We'll leave the links in the description on YouTube and in the show notes on podcasting, audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. This is actually good to mention. It's actually going to be shutting down in 2 weeks. So if you get the show there...
I'm so rattled. That's where I get
is that your way you get shows?
Yeah, so now I got to switch everything over to Spotify. So Follow us on Spotify, everybody.
Yeah, Google Podcasts is going away. I think they want to encourage you to use YouTube Music, which is actually not bad if your podcast uses it, because you can start on video and then you can switch to audio if you're on the go or anything like that. So, nice. I don't know. It's definitely an option, but the podcast world is always changing, and hey, we're doing our best to evolve with it as well. You can support 2 and Out on Patreon, and if not, you're still cool. You could be a little bit cooler,
Kinda.
though. We will talk to you later this week to get you ready for week 2 on the 2 and Out CFL podcast.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.